Dear friends, I hope that you're all in the best of health and spirits. I thought I would give you some insights as to Rumi's and Shabastari's view on enlightenment. And as you know, when we use that word in English, it tends to mean spiritual illumination very often, but it can also mean insight and knowledge. And so, of course, we have historically the period of enlightenment in Europe, which leads to all kinds of discoveries and so forth. But the greater discovery would be to get to know one's own spirit at the core of ourselves. And so what I'd like to do is I'll start with a citation from Shabastari. So he says in this line in Persian, Jahan jumla furugh nur haq dan. Haq andar vei ze paydayist penhan. So he says, the whole world is the radiance of true reality. But true reality is hidden within through obviousness and ubiquity. Now, Rumi has a very similar line, almost identical, in which he says, Jan ze paydayi o nazdikist gum, chun shikampur ab o lab khushki chu khum. So my translation there is, spirit in its obviousness and proximity is concealed. Sated with water, how are you like a full barrel with dry lips? So both of them have the sense of trying to explain the lack of enlightenment or the pathway to understanding the barriers to enlightenment, and in fact how enlightenment is always there within each of us, delightfully full of its own radiance and beauty. But it is we who fail to experience that very often. We are diverted, as Rumi will say to us next, by the colors. And colors in Persian and in Arabic, they often have the meaning of the character of things or the nature of things or the resemblance of things, really outer things. And so Rumi continues with the next line, where he says, Kai bibini surkh o sabz o fur ra, ta nabini pish az in se nur ra. So he says, how could you see red and green and russet if you had not already seen light? So here he obviously means that prior to the appearance of things that are sensual things, sensible things, coming to us through the senses, which thereby conceal the vast spirit, which is beyond such restrictions. And so he goes on to say, Lek chun dar rang gum shod hush tu, shod zinur on rang ha ru push tu. He says, because your awareness is lost in color, you're veiled from seeing the light. Next line. Chun keshab on rang ha mastur bud, pas bididi didi rang as nur bud. He says, since when night falls, those colors are hidden, you then observe that colors come from light. Nist di de rang be nure birun, hamchunin range khiyale andarun. Colors are not seen without there being light, which is also true of colors in the imagination. So, as you can see, he's also saying, with regard to colors, is if we should become of their origin from light, then they might actually guide us both externally and internally. Trying to think of an analogy, one of them might be a rainbow. And so if we think about the nature of a rainbow, it is, of course, multicolored. In fact, it's usually listed of having 6 or 7 colors. And but the rainbow, as we know from science, is also light that happens to be refraction or reflection that is going through fine drops of rain, mist, etc. And the rainbow is, of course, something we're very attracted to. It is a good omen. We, almost all cultures, regard it as a good omen. It is very beautiful, obviously. And arguably, in this metaphor, those colors could be described, for example, as the 7 primary qualities of God, you see, or the 6 or the 7, however you wish to count them, meaning life, power, will, etc. So even, in other words, even getting to know God's qualities, which for us as human beings tends to be through our thought processes or a sense of what these characteristics mean. Yet at a deeper level, of course, God's Spirit, God's essence is well beyond those descriptions. So, coming back to Rumi, he says, actually the English of that particular line first, if I may, this last line that I read to you of his in Persian. He says, the sun and stars produce the outer colors. Internal colors are reflections of the higher lights. نیست دید رنگ بی نور بیرون همچنین رنگ خیال اندرون. So the internal seeing, he's obviously now referring to what occurs in zikr and meditation, is we are, of course, aware of outer distractions and essentially colors, they're objects, but then there are also the inner light, which we see very often through all kinds of imagery when we do the practice of meditation or zikr. And as you well know from many talks that I've given, these are considered at times useful, these visions, we'll call them. And yet at the same time, we must not get too attached to them. In other traditions like Zen, they prefer not to even give them any attention whatsoever. But in Sufism, we do allow, we accept the appearance of those visions, and we allow them to come in, and we perhaps get an insight that allows us to go more deeply into spirituality. But at all times, it is important that we understand that these two are external to the essence of true reality, and in fact to our own essence, which is spirit, free of such things. So Rumi goes on now, and he says, in birun as afetab was suha, wandarun as akse anware ula. So here he says, the sun and stars produce the outer colors. Internal colors are reflections of the higher lights, meaning the celestial lights. So again, he is acknowledging that the difference between what we see in the outer world and what we see in the inner world, these are important distinctions. And in our inner world, he's describing these visions as in fact descending into our consciousness and our awareness. And they are metaphors and analogies and signs, as we would say, in Islamic spirituality. And so they are accepted on that basis. And in fact, if we look at those Sufis, for example, Lahiji, who in his famous book, the Mafati Ali Jaz fi Shari Gulshan Raz, he talks about the stages of advancing for the sake of enlightenment. And the very first stage has to do with these visions that Rumi is describing now. And he says a very nice thing about that. He says, this is the stage of ta'nis, of uns, meaning of an intimacy that is shared by God with his creature, with the human being, at this early stage through images and signs, attracting the dervish or the practitioner of meditation, attracting them with these metaphors, these visions, which are metaphorical, essentially. And all of us who have done meditation over the years, we are quite aware of what this is about. And as time goes on, these particular visions tend to um, become less, and what becomes more is this great ocean of spirit um, that takes us to a deeper place. You see. So to continue, um, he says, "Nur cheshme chod, nur delast, nur cheshm as nur delha haselast." So now he wishes to talk a little bit more about this nur, of course, means light, and a little bit more about the nature of this light. So let's recall that in English, for example, I could say that I see what you mean. And what that actually means is that I understand what you mean. So just as in English, when we say that in Persian and other language, most languages, seeing has a broad meaning, very broad meaning, and it very often means to understand, to observe, etc. So in this passage, these next few lines of Rumi's, he's going to be using double entendre, meaning something that has more than one meaning, and he's giving insight with regard to these levels of meaning. So the translation of that line is, the light of the heart gives the eye its light. The light of the eyes is derived from the heart's light. So there you can see that there's that which we see outside of ourselves all the time. And when we close our eyes, as you said in the earlier line, one might very well have the idea of the internal colors and reflections, which are signs from God, but also that we understand that fundamentally what we see of the world is really tied to our spirit and our spirit's ability to see things in a vast and comprehensive way. So obviously that which we see outside is lesser. Nevertheless, it is derived from our internal seeing or knowing. Another way to put it, that which we know in the outside world is limited, but it nevertheless arises out of our internal sense of knowing things. To continue, he says, Baz nur nur, Baz nur nur dil, nur khudast. Kuz nur aql wa his, pak wa judast. Baz nur dil, nur khudast. Kuz nur aql wa his, pak wa judast. So he next says, he says, the light of God illuminates the heart, and the heart's light that he was talking about in the previous line. And it does this separately from sensual or sensory and mental light. So now we can see that this seeing or understanding is ultimately from God's seeing and God's understanding. And now he goes on in the next line. He says, Shab nabud nuri, nadidi rangha, pas bazede nur paida shod tura. He says, there was no light at night, and you didn't see colors. This is obvious because of the opposite of light. So obviously the opposite of light is darkness. And he's now going to shift a little bit into this idea of seeing, meaning understanding, and its source of true understanding versus partial understanding. And so he explains that at night, meaning in the domain when there is very little or no light, and therefore very little understanding, you didn't see the characteristics of the things because they're hidden to you, from you. And he says this becomes obvious or is obvious because this is the opposite of light. Then he says in Persian, he says, Didan nur ast unga did rang. When, yani wa in, bazed nur dani bidarang. Didan nur ast unga did rang. و این با ضد نور دانی بیدرنگ. So he says, once the light is seen, colors can be seen. You suddenly know this by what is the opposite of light. So again, he's broaching on the topic of, in a sense, you could say the value of understanding one's absolute absence of knowledge. And this is sort of also true in the Platonic tradition, the creative effect of having the position of, I know nothing, sort of starting over or clearing a space. And that darkness or night, I know nothing, is a very creative place and can often lead one to understand what one had previously seen, in this case as colors. So to continue in the Persian, he says, رنج و غم را حق پای آن آفرید تا بدین زد خوشدلی آید پدید. رنج و غم را حق پای آن آفرید تا بدین زد خوش دلی آید پدید. He says, God made suffering and sadness so that happiness could be known by such opposites. So it is through opposites that we get to know things. I'm talking here about the average capacity of human beings to become aware of things through their opposites. And this happens to us every day. We only come to miss someone, for example, when they're gone. So they were here. The opposite of that is they're gone. And by them being gone, hopefully, we would miss them. So the opposites teach us the value and the meaning of opposites in and of themselves. So he's switching here again, and he's wanting to continue this line of thinking, the continuity between the vision of the eyes, their dependence on the vision of the heart, and the heart's dependence on God's vision. And the way we learn things as human beings is somewhere through the first two of them. Our eyes and the eyes of our heart obviously can mean the understanding of the heart. I only knew that I would miss that person when they left, you see. So he's in this passage that I'm quoting to you, he's exploring several things at once that are useful. Now, to continue, he says, Pas nehani ha bazed paida shavad, chun ke haq ra nist zed, penhan بود. پس نهانی ها با زد پیدا شود چون که حق را نیست زد پنهان بود. Very common idea. The translation here is hidden things are made apparent through opposites. Yet, since God has no opposite, no contrary, he remains concealed. So again, those things which are hidden to us for the human being are very often made apparent through opposites. At the same time, we must understand that God forever remains as the essence, as in his essence, he remains concealed, you see. And I'm trying to think of there's a line of Shabbos stories where he's talking about God's essence being darkness, actually, you see. Black, meaning his light being black. And he says, who goes into that darkness finds the water of life. So in other words, the again, we're talking really about prior to fana, which means the temporary loss of the ego, one in fact can participate in a measure of God's knowledge. However, as Shrabastari says, Siyahi gar bedani nurizat ast, batariki darun ab hayat ast. Siyahi gar bedani nurizat ast, batariki darun ab hayat ast. So as I was quoting to you earlier, what he was saying, whoever goes within that darkness finds the water of life, and the water of life is nothing other than baqa. So, however, most of Rumi's poem is, in this particular poem, is focused on the capacities we have. And let me say to you that I hope you understand he's asking us to appreciate each of our faculties, to understand that we are ever capable of learning if we pay attention. So our external vision, if we were to pay attention, as it says in the Quran, we would see that every leaf is praising God. Every mote, every grain of sand, we would see in the sense of know. Because again, remember, for Rumi, knowing and seeing, they are synonymous, or they can be synonymous. So, let's now go to the last line of this particular selection that I've made, where he says, Ke nazar bar nur bud unga barang, zed bazed paida buvad chun rum wazang. Ke nazar bar nur bud unga barang, zed bazed paida buvad chun rum wazang. So in English, once the light is seen, and afterwards the colors, opposites will show their opposites, like white and black. So I hope you'll think about this poem of his and those few other citations that I've given to you. And just this is all part of the talks that we've recently had about seeing and knowing. La tudrikul absaru wa huwa yudrikul absar. So, for example, Rumi often quotes the Quran where the human being is, after all, looking for God. But God says, La tudrikul absaru, but their eyes are not able to comprehend him or to see him. Wa huwa yudrikul absar. Wa huwa latiful khabir. But he is aware of their watching. He is seeing them looking for him. Wa huwa latiful khabir, because he is subtle and aware. So he is permanently aware, and his subtlety is precisely that which each of those poets described at the beginning, having to do with true reality being concealed by obviousness and ubiquity. It is around us all the time, ever present, ever aware. So when we do the meditation, when we do the zikr, this is actually very useful. Just regard each aspect of your experience as a source of learning. And relax. And by going more deeply into the meditation or the zikr, ultimately, God willing, you will find this domain that I quoted to you from Shabbastari, about the darkness. I mean, the essence, the light of the essence is darkness. So the light of God is radiant light, is it not? In the verse of light in the Quran, it's very clear. So in that manifestation, he is Allah, he is God, and God appears as light. And yet we don't experience that light in the same way because we are diverted. The light strikes the earth and everything we see, and we are drawn to the colors, meaning the characteristics of those things that we see. So using that path backwards and going towards the one would mean that of the two of us, God and us, one of us has to vanish, shall we say, or be veiled from itself, and that would take us into the domain that he talks about of the light of the essence being blackness. Anyway, I hope you'll think about this, and I encourage you to consider carefully what they say, and I encourage you to keep learning from whatever comes up within you, however difficult, however exciting. Watch it, and as Rumi says, they are guests. Watch them, welcome them, and then bid them adieu. Bid them goodbye, say goodbye to them and let them go. May God bless you.